All right, everyone, part two of chapter seven. Like I said, we're going to really go into details of like what makes a formal report, and we're going to review all nine aspects of formal reports. At first, I thought the textbook was really overcomplicating this aspect of a formal report because sometimes you may not use all nine aspects. Sometimes they can be combined. Like I feel like the executive summary introduction can probably be combined. I've never used or drafted a letter or memo transmittal, but this is all going to depend on so many variables. It's going to depend on your industry or the field you go into. It's going to depend on one type of project you're working on, what type of research you're doing. It's going to depend on your client. It's going to depend on your organization. There's going to be so many variables. So, to prepare you for whatever may come down the line, we're going to review all nine aspects. The first is pretty obvious, the cover or title page. Whether bound or sent via email, your cover page is going to be the first page your readers will read. So make sure you include four key pieces of information: the title, your client's name. You can usually label this as prepared for and then list the name, your name and or the name of your organization. Maybe you are the solo writer or researcher. Maybe it's a team of researchers and then you wrote it. Maybe you have a team, team of like five or six all contributed to this report and you are representing the organization. Whatever the case may be, you label this as prepared by and then you list it. And then the date, whether this is the date where everything was approved internally, legal, medical, whatever your industry might be, or the date you were submitting this to your client or to your reader. Letter or memo transmittal. Like I said, I haven't drafted this before, but my field doesn't require it. Your field might. This is usually a preview of what your readers can expect. A reader outside of your organization, you're going to draft a letter. A reader inside of your organization, you draft a memo. No matter it's a letter or memo, you're going to follow four guidelines. The letter or memo usually goes after the title page. You want to include a major point of the report. Give a preview. What's that main point? Why are they reading this? Why? Answer your readers that question. Why? And then you're going to acknowledge those who helped you. You might be the solo writer, but maybe you had a team of researchers. Maybe you had some graphic designers help you put this together. Maybe there is a larger team. Always acknowledge the people who helped put this report together. And then you're going to follow the major conventions of a letter memo. Make sure it's easy to read, short paragraphs, no more than 3 to 5 lines, and make sure this is free of jargon, company lingo, abbreviations. Keep it very conversational. Table of contents are going to be so important because this gives a preview to your readers, but also, as we talked about in the first chapter, you are going to be writing for different readers. They might require different information, they might have different needs, different expectations. No matter who your reader is, they will always reference the table of contents. Not only does it give a preview of the report, but sometimes some people may not need to know, like, okay, how did this research go? How did you analyze this? I just need to know what the findings are. Decision makers might go straight to recommendations. Some people might highlight a specific area to mark where they left off. Your readers will always go back to table of contents, so this is very important. You want to make sure this is very readable. Okay. So you want the table of contents to look pleasing to the eye so your readers can find sections quickly and they can see the relationship to each other. So be sure you are spacing well, using indents, and including page numbers for every major heading. You want to use a table of contents to reveal the emphasis, the main points. Be specific yet concise. So each heading listed in the table of contents gives the reader a good indication of what that section contains. Consider leaving out low level headings, usually subheadings. And very long reports, you may want to declutter the table of contents by removing those lower level headings. Make sure you list your appendices. This includes items such as tables of data, descriptions of procedures, pictures, whatever they may be. They are usually inserted at the end of the report. Typically, they are listed at the end of the table of contents. Use parallel form with your table of contents. That pretty much means everything matches, format matches, indents are aligned, font, sizing, they all look the same. It's all the same, which leads into the importance of proofreading. So, some insight. Usually, wrong page numbers and incorrect headings are the two very common mistakes when it comes to table of contents. So, you want to make sure this is proofread carefully. Make sure your page numbers align. Make sure you have the right correct headings because this is what's going to direct your readers. So, if this is incorrect, then your readers are going to be lost. List of illustrations. Sometimes you may not need illustrations, sometimes you may, depending on your field. But illustrations are usually listed on a separate page after the table of contents. Or if you want to keep everything on the same page, another option is to list them at the bottom of table of contents. No matter which format you choose, your illustration should always include three main things. Number, that is just simply figure 1.1, figure 1.2, figure 1.3, and so on. Title, that's usually where figure 1.1, chart of animal data. Figure 1.2, photo of medical procedure. Make sure there's a title for every illustration you have. And then page number. Make sure you list the page numbers where your readers can find these illustrations. Executive summary is considered a standalone section. This is where I said I feel like this can sometimes be combined with maybe the introduction. It's just going to depend. So you're going to put this on one page. It's different from an abstract. The executive summary helps the reader determine if an action is going to be needed, if there's going to be a decision at the end of this. You want to avoid technical jargon. Only include language decision makers can understand. You don't want to talk over the heads of the most important readers. Include only the important conclusions and recommendations. Like I said, this is usually gives an insight into there's going to be a decision needed. So highlights the major points of those conclusions and recommendations that leads to the decision that needs to be made. Avoid references to the report body. That just helps cut out unnecessary language because the reader knows they have to read the report to review your findings. So it's just unnecessary language that you can just cut out. Use paragraph format. Using a list format in an executive summary can be read as pragmatic. So you just want to keep the summary short with short paragraphs that just flow well. And the executive summary is written last. You can only draft this once your report is finished and you know what's going to be included in your report. How can you write the executive summary about the main points if you don't even have the report written? So that's why this is usually written last. Introduction. You want to view this section as your chance to prepare both technical and non-technical readers for the discussion ahead. You want to give information on the report's purpose, scope, and the format. So state your purpose and then lead into subsections. You should kick this off with like a follow-up into subdivisions. If readers are interested, if there's going to be a decision maker who's going to be reading this, highlight that you will be providing recommendations to the solution in the recommendations section, something like that. Include a project description. Be precise. Maybe you are describing like a physical setting. You're out in the field, a set of problems, or maybe just include you are going to be reviewing this study and the body of the report. Always include some brief project description. Include scope information. So this should be parallel to the order of the info presented in the body of the report. So this is where you're just outlining the precise objectives of the report. You are saying, this is my report. This is what we're going to be analyzing. I review this in the analysis section. We will be reviewing findings in the finding sections. It seems very like, is that all necessary? It's just helping your readers understand to what to expect. And then including information on the report format. So sometimes you may not use like a scope format. Maybe you just want to give a preview instead. So this is where you just close the intro with a brief preview of the main sections. And there it goes. Okay. Your discussion sections make up the largest part of formal reports. So this is where you are moving from facts. So you have listed the study, you've listed your process, you've listed your control variables, you've listed all of that. You've done the research, you've listed the science. Now let's discuss what you have found. And this is where you are moving from facts to opinions. So this is where you begin with data. You're collecting, you're analyzing it, and then you develop recommendations. Make sure you are using frequent headings and subheadings. This is going to be really important to help your readers grasp the content of your report. It's pretty much an outline. So for whatever major section you create in your report, make sure there's a heading in there. You want to use listings to break up long paragraphs. So remember with the executive summary, I said don't use a listing format that can read as pragmatic. With this, you can use a list format because there's going to be a lot of content, a lot of information. So to help your reader digest the content, use a list, use numbers, bullet points, A, B, and C, whatever you think might look clean and help your reader. And then place excessive detail in the appendices. This just helps avoid clutter while still giving access to your readers. And make sure you are labeling them clearly. You can give like a brief overview and then say more found in appendix A, more found in appendix B. Conclusions and recommendations. So this is where this is your convictions or beliefs based on the findings of your study. Conclusions can also lead into recommendations, which is actions that you are suggesting based on your conclusions. So those are the two differences. Conclusions are convictions or beliefs based on the findings of your study. Recommendations are the actions that you are suggesting based on the conclusions. So, for example, maybe your conclusion is there's a dangerous level of toxic chemicals in a town's water supply. That's your conclusion at the end of your report. Your recommendation may be that the toxic site near the reservoir needs to be cleaned immediately. And there are usually three different formats to list for this. It can be conclusions, it can be recommendations, or it can be conclusions and recommendations. It's just going to depend on the flow of your report. You might need to label both. You may be able to wrap it all up in a conclusion. I've seen actually both aspects where it's just conclusion, just recommendations, conclusion, and recommendations. It's all going to depend on your field and the need of your readers. And lastly, end materials. You've heard me mention about charts, tables, appendices. So this is the end material. So think your appendices. Think works cited page, bibliographies. Make sure you are including those end materials at the end of your report. Don't forget because it helps your reader. It helps them grasp grasp more like with charts. It might help them understand more what your research is trying to say. They can use your bibliography to reference a study and go back and look up something on their own. And that is it. This was a long chapter, I understand, but it was so important because this is a writing course. We're going to be working on reports. So it's very important for you to have this information in your back pocket. So I highly recommend that you review the example of a formal report in the textbook. It starts on page 137. It lasts for about there's a lot of images that I think goes on for 5 or 6 pages. It just breaks down all of these points that we reviewed and it shows you how they look like in action. So that's the end of this chapter. We finished both informal and formal reports. And I will see you in the next chapter. Thanks, everyone.